I'm so excited to have the opportunity to speak today with Ross Stambaugh. Ross, how are you doing?
Adam, fantastic. Thanks for asking.
Well, I'm so happy that you're here. I received rave reviews from our mutual friend Walia, who
Oh
owns
yeah,
Red Earth Yoga Center in Oklahoma,
yeah.
and she mentioned that you have visited her there. Is that true? You went and taught some yoga there.
Actually, I taught my first official Ashtanga Yoga workshop with her. I met her in Mysore, India, and it's kind of a funny story. She posted a picture of her standing in front of her apartment, and I knew exactly where it was. So I knock on her door, and she's who is it? And I said, hey, my name's Ross. We've talked to each other on, I think at the time it was Facebook. And she kind of looks out, and she didn't want to open the door. So she's like, how do you know who I am? And then I said, well, I put things together and I saw you. So, but eventually over the course of the next 2 months, we became fast friends. And she invited me to her studio, and we did a lot of yoga.
That's awesome. I know she's a really great person, so I appreciate the introduction. Thank you, Walia. And Ross, I noticed that your website is ashtangahub.com. So anyone listening, I'll put the links in the description below. So it's going to be really easy to find Ross. And also you're on Instagram, which your handle is ashtanga.yoga.ross, which will also be down below. And I love your Instagram posts. Since I've gotten a chance to follow you, you do a great job with your posts. It seems like you're having
Oh,
fun doing it, which
thank you.
is an
Yeah.
art form in and of itself. And then in the process of going to your website and learning about you, you are an Ashtanga yoga practitioner and teacher, and you've studied in Mysore with Saraswati Jois. Is that correct?
That's right. That's
Nice.
right. Yeah. About what is it? I think 2014. I took my first trip to Mysore, and I'm a school teacher, so I had the summers off, and that's when Saraswati Jois, the daughter of Pattabhi Jois, teaches out of her shala. And yeah, went there for a couple of years, several years actually, and just fell in love with the city, fell in love with the temples, fell in love with the philosophy, and of course, yoga.
Right. Mysore is an amazing city. What are some of the favorite things to do for you in Mysore? What do you enjoy doing while you're there, apart from the yoga?
Yeah, I think everyone, if they want to have a quintessential Indian experience, you have to get on a scooter, and you have to get lost in the city, and you have to get try to navigate your way around the cows and the people and the temples, and just get immersed in a culture that's so very different from our Western eyes and ears and sense and everything.
Nice. I agree. I did. No, actually, I did not rent a motorbike in India. I was a little timid of that. I've rented motorbikes in Thailand and in Indonesia, but when I was in India, I really just stuck with the rickshaw. And so that's a bold move to get on a motorbike there. I applaud that courage.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Have you ever had any close encounters there?
Well, Leah and I had a few. Yeah, she jumped on the bike, and of course, she was holding her camera up, and I was waving, and a bus and I came like within a whisker of each other.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
I did my last trip. I was with my mom, and it was the last day, and I was running her around Mysore, and I slipped on some gravel, and I busted up my elbow. Long
Oh,
story short, I'm in the emergency room in there, and in front of us, I don't know what happened, or there was a group of people there waiting, and like India, money talks sometimes, and I'm like, wow, I have a flight to catch in like 3 hours. They won't let me on the airplane because it's not stuff. I needed to get some stitches. And so in my pocket, I had all my rupees left. So I had, I don't know, maybe $200 in rupees, and I take it out of my pocket and I kind of wave it to the nurse up there, and they weighed me in, and I got the stitches, and I think it was maybe 40, maybe 60 US dollars at the end,
Wow.
and
Right.
then out
Yeah.
out the door, and I got on my flight in
Oh
time. So
man.
yeah.
Amazing. That journey from which airport were you or which city were you flying out of?
I was flying out of Bangalore, so it's a 4 hour drive from Mysore to Bangalore. So we had to jump in a taxi and then get that taxi to the airport.
That's an amazing trip, isn't it? I remember the first, my
Yeah,
wife and I went to Mysore in 2004. And when we got to Bangalore and walked out the doors, and it seemed like at least 100 people all willing to help us out. And that was our first, like, overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, what do we do? You know, unique
yeah,
experience. That is amazing. You're right. That's what makes it
yeah,
so fun to go there. I'm,
yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
I'm really curious, how did it evolve that you were able to invite your mom and your mom being willing to say yes? And how did that happen?
Well, I would spend time there. So, like I said, I was a teacher and I had a few months off. And my mom just recently retired, and she's always been, one a very quiet mom, but she's always been had a little adventurous side to her. And she said, "Well, can I come and see what you do? You talk about yoga, you practice yoga. You're always doing yoga. Can I come and see what you do?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So she jumped on an airplane and she hung out with me for almost 3 weeks. It was a great experience.
That's so cool. What a great opportunity.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And when was the last time you were in India? Have you been there since 2019, 2020?
No, I last trip was 2018 at the end of the summer, and then of course COVID started to build. So I've missed out the last 2 seasons,
Yeah.
3 seasons almost, and but I'm hoping to return this coming July.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. And I noticed that you said you were a school teacher, but teach art to the school kids.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a middle school art teacher. I've been doing that for 22 years. This is 23rd.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Did you have you been an artist your whole life? Is that something that you were involved in when you were in middle school age and then progressed to wanting to go to school for it and now teach?
Yeah, it was sort of the only thing I could get out of school with. you know, I would take all the classes in junior high and high school and of course college. And I was a fine arts major for 2 years. I focused on like traditional painting, and I didn't really have the aptitude for it. I was okay, but I wasn't. I I was in a group of people that were better than okay. They were really driven. And I noticed right away I simply didn't have that level of talent. But both my parents were teachers, and my sister's a teacher, and all my cousins are teachers. So it just felt like a thing to do. I enjoyed traveling, and I recognized that a teacher's schedule would allow me to do that. So, yeah, I've been a teacher, and I've been really enjoying it.
That's cool. On that note, I have a daughter who's in fourth grade. And as I was studying up and getting ready for this opportunity to speak with you, I heard her in the background. She had a substitute teacher, and she said, all he did was look at his phone all day. He didn't teach us anything. And I kind of cracked up thinking, like, yeah, substitute teacher gig. But when I was in school, we didn't have cell phones back in the old days. And I just thought it just kind of cracked me up to think about a substitute just like staring at his or her phone for the whole session and saying, all right, kids, just do what you want. I'm guessing though that you take a really proactive role in the education process. Can you share a story or two about what it's like being a teacher and working with middle school age kids?
Yeah, well, you have to be proactive, or else they'll just eat you alive. Um, I have such a spectrum of abilities and such a spectrum of maturity, and you have to be able to figure out how to engage each and every one. And sometimes there's success, but oftentimes there's trial and error, and we certainly fall onto the error of things. So I think that's a great kind of segue into uh, yoga. Recognizing when the external circumstances are not in your control, and you have to rely on a little bit of faith and rely on a little bit of skill and a little bit of the unknown to get through the day. And hopefully you have something left to uh, give to children, right?
Mm,
Give to the people that are not oftentimes willing to accept the struggle of learning,
mm.
right? Whenever we grow, especially in yoga, whenever we grow, we have to be okay with the struggle, uh, which is certainly hard to do.
Yes. Yes. What was your first yoga class?
I kind of had two first yoga classes. My first yoga class, I was I have to say junior or senior in high school, and this was in '91 or '92. And at that time, if you wanted to do any yoga, you either read it from a book or you took it from someone in the basement of a church. So I did the latter, and it was I couldn't even really tell you what type of style it was, except I remember just lying on the floor, believing that this yoga teacher truly had the ability to read minds.
Yeah.
And I like, this is amazing, but I don't want her to read my mind because I don't know. And I took that, and I thought that was interesting, but I just didn't have the focus. As a teenager, I
Yeah.
certainly didn't have the focus.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was done with college. I was walking down the street in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I look inside a head shop, and they were playing a video of Richard Freeman, and he was doing this unbelievable handstand. He had his legs in lotus, and he did this beautiful handstand, and then he jumps out of it and he floats down, and I was mesmerized. I was hooked. And I bought the VHS and I brought it home and I tried to do it. It was like an hour and 40 minutes of him doing primary series of the Ashtanga Yoga system. If you don't know about that, it's one of the most difficult systems of yoga, most strenuous styles of yoga. But I practiced it every day until that VHS tape broke. Um, and yeah, the rest is history. Haven't stopped since.
That's so cool, Ross. I'm curious. That must have been around about like 2002 or so for you,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
earlier,
Yeah,
especially if you're talking
2001. Yeah.
2001. Because my first Ashtanga yoga experience was through David Swinson's VHS tape, his primary series.
Yeah.
That opening scene where he's out on the dock out over the water and he does that like really beautiful display of combination of poses from first, second, third series that I was like, holy cow, what is that? And that's so cool to hear someone else say that from watching an early, some of our heroes from the early days of Ashtanga. Just a demonstration was all it takes to get completely fired up.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how long did you practice on your own to the VHS before you then had exposure to a teacher?
Oh, I'd probably say 5, 6 years
Wow.
I practiced. And I needed discipline. From the day of at school, I needed an outlet to vent, and I needed an outlet to uh, release all that energy that's always being pushed on you. And I thought it would be something more explosive like boxing or MMA or something, but I found that I needed quiet, and it wasn't happening in my head until about the third or fourth sun salutation,
Mm,
and I could feel like I was breathing again,
nice.
uh, and uh, and yeah, so I did that for 5 6 years, and then a studio opened down the street from where I was living, and they did Ashtanga. They didn't call it Ashtanga. Well, they called it Ashtanga, but they didn't count. And they there it wasn't a traditional led class, but they did the best they could with the knowledge they had. Phenomenal teachers, and I did that for 6 or 7 years.
Nice.
Um,
Awesome.
yeah.
And say like oppose like Mrityasana D in relation to how flexible or not flexible were your hips when you started practicing from watching and doing self practice, not having anyone assist you. Well, could you do Mrityasana A right off the bat? Or I'm sorry, Mrityasana D right off the bat? Or was it something that was really challenging, but you figured out how to eventually slowly ease your way into it?
I'm gonna say both. I could force myself into it,
Mm,
and so I didn't have a teacher to tell me that that wasn't the best way. So I would force myself into it because at one time someone told me, "Oh, Hatha yoga is the way, forceful yoga." And I took it as physically forceful,
mm,
not
yeah.
mentally. Like you need mental fortitude.
Yeah.
And being an ex college swimmer and being an athlete, I recognized that you could push past it. So
Mm.
yeah, I could do it, but um, I wasn't doing any yoga. I was doing sport yoga.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just doing what I thought I saw. Uh,
What was the turning point that helped you to feel the transition from sport yoga into a deeper layer of the yoga practice?
Boy, all of the above. And I know that's kind of a wishy-washy answer,
That
but
makes sense.
I recognize you grow into this maturity of yoga, and it's not like you master any part of it. I think the exact opposite. You gain the knowledge that you don't know anything, and you become you have to add some humility to your practice.
Mm,
I learned at kind of a younger age about the limits of the physical body. I get injured doing other sports, swimming, judo. I get hurt all the time in judo, and then I'd go practice more yoga and then come back. Um, I can't say that there was a monumental shift. Like I woke up one day and go, yeah, yoga. It was only recently when I look at the 20-year-olds that are now starting yoga and how they've been exposed to just phenomenal teachers and how easy it is to get this knowledge. And I recognize that the knowledge that they're receiving is the same knowledge you and I are receiving or have received. We're just receiving it. They're receiving it at a different pace,
mm, yeah.
and they don't have, which I didn't have, and neither of us had at the time, is the experience of yoga.
Yeah.
To have a filter
Mm,
clear enough to put some of these bigger philosophies and these bigger things into perspective, and use it less as a form of argument or critique, and more of a lens of inclusion with this with yoga.
nice. Yeah, I would agree with all that. That makes perfect sense. I think if you mentioned that you took your first yoga class in like junior or senior and it was around like 91 or 92, we must be the same age. Did you graduate in 92 as a senior?
I graduated in '94, so I'm
Gotcha.
47.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm just a year older, so we're around about the
Okay.
same. time period. That's awesome. Nice to meet a fellow same aged yogi. And
That's
so on
right.
that note, I'm curious, from watching your Instagram, you've been able to maintain strength and flexibility to an incredible degree.
Oh, that's kind of you to say.
Are you, does it feel that way to you?
It it's starting to leave. I fight. You got to fight for what you want, and you have to be okay with what you have. But I've had to adopt a strength training routine a few years ago. Um, Again, from injuries I forced upon myself. Like I'm sure you've heard this too. Yoga will cure every ailment that you have. And one ailment I had was back pain. And it wasn't until my third or fourth trip in India where I was literally crawling up the hill back to my apartment because my back was in such pain. This is 10 years of back pain. And I got lucky. Long story short, got lucky. And there was a massage therapist and a healer there that helped me through the process. But I learned that yoga couldn't cure my back pain. I had to um, find a physical therapist. I found several physical therapists, and they brought me back to life. But one thing I had to do was I had to have proper strength training. Um, and so I started lifting weights, kept in my yoga practice, started eating much healthier, and yeah, took took care of
Uh,
my body the best I
yeah.
can.
Yeah. I hear you. Awesome, man. Great to hear. Do, where are you currently teaching? Are you teaching locally so you're in Ohio, is that correct?
Right? Yeah.
And do you work in a studio? Do you work via internet? Do you work one-on-one? Do you work with groups? What does your typical teaching schedule look like on a weekly basis?
Yeah. I'm reluctant. I'm a reluctant yogi. I don't have any of that kind of nailed down. Um,
Yeah.
I I recently I teach abroad a lot now, um, and I try to dabble in everything. Dayton, Ohio is not the hub for Ashtanga yoga, so I have to be a little creative. I use my studio here. You can see back here, I have space for two or three people.
Yeah.
If they're in the neighborhood and they wish to practice, I invite them. But I found that my favorite way to interact is in person workshops. Right? Yeah, a lot of yoga I think doesn't necessarily need to be over explained, and it doesn't necessarily need to be complicated, but it needs to have an interaction of trust and a certain level of interaction that's a give and take, and I think that's very difficult to do online, and certainly difficult to do with tutorials. I teach pranayama online for some people, and I teach a half led primary online, and then on the weekends I do workshops where I'm invited. So I have a few coming up right now this month in the surrounding tri-state area, Kentucky and Tennessee, Raleigh, and then at the end of the month, I'll be in York and in the UK and Lisbon and Portugal and Madrid as
Nice.
well. So I
Awesome.
have some trips planned. Yeah.
Very cool. I saw that on your IG or Instagram, your schedule posted, and I was excited for you to see that. That's really cool. I know
Oh, thanks.
that for people that travel and teach, the last 2 years have been very challenging for that. So I'm always excited to see anything that resembles that kind of pre 2020 model. So when I saw that you're going
Yeah.
overseas and traveling around the area, I was like, that's really cool, man. I'm excited for you, Ross, that you're
Oh,
keeping that going. I do, there is something that's completely magical about being in the room with people and having that feedback process and the energy and the experience of being able to see other practitioners, hear other practitioners breathe. So I agree with you. I also love the online element too. I'm really excited about it, but I see the benefits and the challenges of both for sure. That's cool, man. Do when you teach pranayama online, can you give me any insight about what type of, are you doing all audio cueing, or are you utilizing a camera on in front of you to be able to make any sort of hand gestures, such as an inhale with your hand going up or an exhale with your hand going down or something of that nature? What have you found works well for you?
Well, I found a simple formula to follow is key. Obviously, being on time is key, and Q&A I've found is really good as well. Giving them enough time to think about a brooding question and respond. And I always find it great when other students from other countries chime in. They always have a unique perspective apart from us kind of Westerners saying, okay, did I do it right? Did I do this right? They always want to be reassured that they did it exactly right. I find where more Europeans have a little softer, more philosophical approach to the way they form their questions. So I think we get a great exchange, and I think Zoom particularly has made yoga teachers have to step up their game. Ashtangis are known for their physical adjustments, not their cues. So they had to be creative. I certainly had to be creative on how to explain the nuances of Trikonasana, Uttasana, you have to be very creative with that. And you have the opportunity now to study with some absolutely top-notch yoga teachers, and so it's great to be exposed to people you would never ever be able to be exposed to this way.
Good point. What was your first experience with practicing the traditional Ashtanga style pranayama?
I hated it. I absolutely hated every second of it.
Yeah.
There's the 8 limbs, and everyone does asana. Asana is, you can't deny the magnitude and the attraction of it. And I was in Mysore, and I wanted to learn the traditional pranayama sequence. Tim Miller in Encinitas, California, did it at a workshop that I attended. I don't know when. He was in Columbus, Ohio, and he didn't do much. He said, "I'll just do a little bit," and he did a little bit, and he wouldn't do the whole sequence. And I tried to piecemeal it together. There's these 6 techniques, and no one would teach me in India. I'd go and I'd talk to people, and they go, "Oh, no, it's scary. You're gonna go crazy." And then I finally found David Roach. He's a expat living in Australia. He's certified Ashtanga Yoga teacher. I said, "Will you teach me Ashtanga, the sequence?" And he said, "Yeah, come tomorrow, and I'll teach you the sequence." And as soon as he started, he did it traditionally, but he did it with a metronome. And he started. He's like, "Let's make it easy. Let's put it at 30 beats per minute." Well, that's 2 seconds a beat. And so he started to like, okay, we're gonna keep this cadence up for the duration. And I was a college swimmer, so I said, "Oh, I think I can do this." And I did everything I could from seeing stars to trying to pass out. And I said, "David, thank you so much for teaching me this." Got on my scooter, and I said, I'm never going to do this again." And it wasn't until the next trip I went and I saw him again where I dug my heels in and said, "Hey, this is there's got to be a reason why this is important. There's got to be a reason why it's in this particular order. You know, asana, I can't live in asana forever. So I approached him a second time and said, okay, David, I confess I didn't practice. Can we start again? And of course he said yes. And then something happened where I noticed that I started to withdraw in the ways that were described in in these texts that we read and these stories that we listen to about pratyahara, about a truer sense withdrawal. And it wasn't until my guru, or one of my Sanskrit teachers, off the cuff, said, you know, yoga is about living your life at 200%. 100% internally, 100% externally. And that just kind of floored me, where you have to be able to be frictionless between these two realms that you live in, and know that your internal realm deserves just as much attention as your external realm. And I couldn't reach that, or I couldn't dig into that until I started with a daily pranayama practice.
Mm.
And with that daily pranayama practice came an understanding a little bit more of the asana. And I noticed that the asana it didn't need to go as deep in order for me to get a reaction, internally.
Yeah.
I didn't need to beat myself up until I was exhausted to feel to feel okay, to calm down. So now, if I miss pranayama for a couple of days, I notice my practice, my physical practice is fine, but my mental practice through it isn't the same.
Nice. Yeah, I hear you. It is an amazing practice. When you teach students pranayama, so say, for example, on the very first one with the Rechaka Kumbhaka and Purdaka Kumbhaka, the exhale retention and the inhale retention, what type of ratio do you like to start people with in terms of like a 6-second inhale and a 6-second exhale, and then hold for 4 seconds, 8 seconds? And then on the inhale side, what is your kind of go-to ratio when you are working with a group?
Yeah, if I'm working with anyone more than one-on-one, it's always a count of eight. And then I start at 50 beats per minute,
Mm-hmm.
with a metronome.
Yeah.
And I have everything as a count of eight: inhale eight, exhale eight, hold for eight. Just for a few logistics. One, it's simple to follow. Two, it's for people that have never done pranayama, it's a challenging pace, but not impossible. And I try to stress that we're only doing the mechanics of it. We're only scraping the surface. And so that holds me accountable for a certain standard, and that holds them accountable for a certain standard. And one thing I always enjoyed is that there's no wishy-washy stuff with it. There's no unicorns. There's no mystic chatter that I have to give someone. There's none of these metaphors that forces their imagination to build. I think the idea is to do it. I'm not going to influence what's happening. I'm just going to facilitate what's happening. And rarely ever do I have a student not go through like in a whole range of emotion. I've always asked, did you guys get frustrated? And I'd be surprised how often people put their hand up and go, yeah, I was frustrated. And then I would follow up, do you guys feel calmer? And everyone would put their hand up. And I'd always say, do you feel focused? And yeah. And that is, I find, to be a bridge to pratyahara. a bridge to this opportunity to know that uh, yoga is skill in action, and in order to develop a skill, you have to have focus, and with focus comes this this cushion between you and any distraction, and you can focus on anything. That's the beauty of it. Anything you want, and and establish a clear understanding of yoga.
Mm.
It's not held to the highest regard of priests or the person that can bend their back the most. All you have to do is have a benefit of focus, and I think you're doing yoga.
Great answer. On that on that topic, I feel like one of the things on the first time I got a chance to take a serious Ashtanga class with a serious group of people, and at the closing posture time, Shavasana, or I know we could debate whether we should call it Shavasana or not, but when you lay down, that there would just be take rest and then be quiet. And there was no, now do this, now do that, now imagine this. And I like that when you mentioned with the pranayama that there's not a unicorn or rainbow sort of visualization attached to it, more the experience of the practice. And then I also like that you brought up the range of emotion that's potential to come up all within the same practice, that there can be calm as well as anxiety, within a 30 to 45-minute routine there, you could go through that whole range, which is really amazing part of the yoga practice. I agree with you. That's cool. I'm also curious, how do you structure your physical practice time these days? Do you keep a very regimented routine in terms of like, okay, on Sunday I do second, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday I do third, and then on whichever day
Yeah.
primary? Or are you waking up, or maybe it sounded like maybe you go to work and then after teaching is where you enjoy practice at the end of the day as like a process, a way to process everything. How do you structure your physical practice in relation to the different series?
Yeah. Well, I always practice after work. And I recently, I'd say the last 8 months, it's been primary one day, second the next day, and then most of third when I'm practicing of third the following day. And then I reverse that for the rest of the week. So Thursday, or sorry, Wednesday would be third, Thursday would be second, and then Friday I always try to do primary, but it's in the week, and uh, I do what I can. Recently Saturday has become my rest day, and then Sunday I start the process again. And but I'm human like anybody else, so I'd say 9 out of 10 times I forget two or three postures, or phone rings, or dog has to be fed, or something. But I would say I still get a solid. I give myself a solid B plus when it comes to keeping the postures in. But I do get on my mat every day, even if it's just for a couple sun salutations.
Nice.
Um, but I have a lifestyle that permits me to have that extra time, and I've always held that to a high regard.
Yeah.
And with that comes, you have to put some walls up to be able to have that choice.
Yeah. Good point. In relation to relationships with other people and them wanting you to do something and you saying, no, I don't have, I want this time for me. Is that what you're alluding to, or a different type of putting up barriers, or is it all the one and the same thing?
I've had to put up some barriers. Certainly, we're probably both at that age where drinking just simply doesn't appeal to me at all. It's been a long time since I've had any sort of reaction to a drink or a drink itself. So that's not easy to that's easy to distance myself from people to do that. That's easy. The other part that becomes a little bit more and more difficult to do is have a barrier at work, where I can't give, or I'm not willing to give that the emotional time, the physical after school time, and simply the intellectual time it needs, that I see a lot of teachers do. Just for my own mental health too, I need to dial that back, and that gets me on the mat more and more often.
That makes sense.
And really, it's just going to bed on time.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen 10 o'clock on an alarm clock in 10, 15 years easily.
I even if I tried, like I get up at 5 every day, and even if I try to sleep in, like some days I'm like, I'm gonna give a real good honest effort to sleep in. Like my body at 5 o'clock, like I'll look at the clock and it's 5:00. Like I'm like, come on. Why?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy how structured it can become. I'm curious, in terms of when you were talking about pranayama, and I guess where I want to head down to this question is with vinyasa flow. But I remember I had asked Tim Miller about pranayama. He had prided himself in being one of the pioneers of being very focused, regimented Ashtanga teacher, but also pioneering the vinyasa flow technique with other teachers, as far as like, if we have this here and we could put that there, I wonder what would happen. And then I'd asked him, Tim, with pranayama, do you ever do pranayama flow? And he's like, nope. Like, nope. Like that's the one thing I will not mess with. And I was like, cool, I get it. And in relation to what you had said, like the consistency of the pranayama, I think, yes, that is a really amazing part of it. How much do you, in terms of the asana world, either in your own practice and or in relation to teaching, do you deviate from the norm in terms of like using research poses, or even going, say, outside of that box into like yin yoga, or I can't even think of a different type of yoga.
Yeah.
A different
Goat
type of
yoga.
yoga. Yeah, goat. Thank you. Goat yoga.
Yeah. I'm a traditionalist. I wouldn't say fundamentalist, but I'm certainly a traditionalist. There is a rhyme and reason to it, and I also think that yoga, it can be arbitrary. You can put any two yoga postures together, and if you breathe through it and you have focus and the integrity is there, then that's yoga, plain and simple. But I have to hold myself to a standard as a teacher, so I can remove that personal bias to the best of my ability, and not force my personal opinions on the physicality of the asana. But that is a double-edged sword. When you're working with students that obviously have limitations within the Ashtanga system, it gets complicated. So what I try to encourage in any of my students that I work with is the integrity of the posture there. Are they engaging the muscles the right way? I guess I could say that. Do I see the tension right? And then I try my best to introduce like a steadiness that gets them through the first posture to whatever posture they're working on, and that steadiness is there for a reason, because your mind is mentally preparing you, right, for these upcoming more challenging poses. And I noticed this, and it happens in me too. You'd have this beautiful primary series, they look absolutely fantastic, and then Kapotasana's coming, and you see them just mentally fall apart. And I'm thinking, you worked an entire hour to to do yoga chitta vritti nirodha, you're right, to calm the sensations of the mind. And what does it do? As soon as you need to bend backwards, it messes with your head. So they weren't using yoga; they were using yoga in the asana sense, and they were totally giving up on the mental of it. But we all do that, and it's so easy. It is so easy to trick ourselves.
Yeah.
Because our mind has a
Yeah.
mind of its own.
Yeah. That is something that I love about the Ashtanga series. That's a great point. It's really easy to avoid the hard stuff.
Yeah.
Make excuses. I hear ya. I'm curious, when a lot of people go to Mysore, they're hungry for, now practice with Sharat, and you study and practice with his mom, Saraswati.
Mm-hmm.
And how did that evolve for you? When you went to Mysore, did you know which person you would take tutelage under, or was it something that evolved upon your first trip there?
At summer times, Sharat wasn't teaching and Saraswati was teaching. So it was just a matter of who was there. And so I walk into her shala. And at the time, there was, about 80 people, maybe 100 people. And right away, my very first practice there. So I was, I did yoga for maybe 10 years. I did Ashtanga for 10 years. So I knew the ropes, and also was an athlete. So I knew how to be coached. And just remember putting my hands up, saying Namaskar. We did the opening chant. We were going to do Mysore. And I said to myself, I don't need to be here. I don't need to learn asana. I know what I'm doing. And I kind of looked to my left and right, and I said, I want to be here. I want to be in this room, and I want to experience this stuff called yoga. I want to figure it out. I didn't want it. I didn't want it to be secondhand knowledge anymore. I was tired of people telling me what it was like. So I wanted to take charge of the experience of Ashtanga Yoga for me. And that gave me this drive of belief that that still stays with me, that I can teach myself, that yoga is going to be self-serving, and is going to be a lot of self-learning as well. You work on yourself for yourself, which kind of sounds selfish. But once you have someone that knows themselves well, they're like a rock. They're steady and unimposing. They're humble. They don't need to prove anything to anyone. And when I meet a few people like that, it's pretty exciting. And I can't put it into words, but I just know. I know them, and I look at them, and you can just see in their face, or you can see in their speech, that they're not budging. That when they're right, and nothing you can do to budge. And I saw that in a couple of people I was practicing with, and I noticed that their practice wasn't fantastic. They were older, more experience of life. And I noticed that they didn't need asana to have that resolve to be focused, and that resolve to stand firm. So I knew that they had other experiences that gave them that ability, and they just brought it into yoga. It was fantastic.
Nice. That's really cool. Great point. I'm enjoying listening to you speak. So sorry it's taking me a second to
It's okay.
formulate my next question.
That's fine. That's fine. I kind of ramble sometimes.
No, you're clear. It's good. I appreciate it. You know, have you experienced serious suffering and or sadness and or loss in life, or um do you feel like that wasn't a major reason for you to seek out yoga?
No, no, no. I've certainly, being of age, I've certainly lost family members and close friends. Some naturally, someone naturally, and the weird part of that is that I've recognized numbness, and numbness isn't what I'm really looking for, but shock.
Mm.
Where you're moving, but you don't know it. I've and but the one thing I've noticed about it, there's a few times where I've had a heavy loss and started leaving my senses behind.
Mm.
Uh, and I said, okay, wait, I've experienced this before. Actually, I've experienced this feeling a lot. And it happens when I'm in deep pranayama,
Huh.
when I have a good pranayama part where I'm starting to pull apart. And the other thing I noticed immediately is everyone around me is going about their business. Nothing changes. It's a normal, everyday interaction in a day. Um, and I try to remember that when things get tough. Uh, you know, I'll share with you one. I had a good friend of mine was killed on a motorcycle,
Uh,
and I was with him, and it was shocking. And a couple of weeks go by, and I kind of come out of this cloud, and start to go back into some hobbies. At the time, it was rock climbing, and I ran into some friends, and a buddy of mine was a rock climbing partner as well, and they said, "Hey, how you doing?" And hey, I'm doing okay. My Dave just passed, and everyone I talked to had someone who died. Everyone, oh hey, my mom died, my dad died, my cousin died, and I wasn't, I wasn't being, it wasn't a selfish thing to hold that in. It was nice to be able to recognize, scan the room, and say, I'm no better, I'm no different, I'm no worse than anyone else in this room. And here we are doing the regular thing that regular people do.
yeah.
And we carry this grief, and we carry this loss, and we carry these heavy burdens somehow, and we don't often get a way to come to terms with them, until we find some yoga,
Good
until we
point.
find some balance.
Yeah. I like the way that you mentioned when you first used the word numb and you said that's not really the word I'm looking for. And then you said like my body's moving forward, but I'm not I'm not aware of it. That's a good way to explain that sort of feeling when someone's experiencing grief and or loss. On the flip side of the coin, when is a time recently that you've felt incredible joy and where you're just in absolute awe of life and this opportunity to be alive? Have you had, I have, day after day, get a nice little routine going. And so I'm not necessarily always looking for like, I need to be overwhelmed with joy, although I do really enjoy that, of course. But have you had an experience lately where you've been floored in appreciation and gratitude and just amazement?
This may be cliche, but I do feel immense gratitude when I get an opportunity to teach, and when I see a student have an aha moment, Um, and if I present it the right way, if I can present it as it was presented to me with the same intention behind it, then I feel comfortable. Like anyone can do like a jump through or a fancy handstand, and someone go, "Oh wow, that's neat."
Mm.
That's not the type of credit I like to receive. I like when a student kind of goes, okay, let me try it, and the mechanics work, and they go, "That's something I can take." That that
Yeah,
that touches me. That touches me. Um,
that's cool,
but
Ross.
as Yeah,
What about the feeling when you conclude a 3-day weekend workshop?
yeah, I'm
Can you explain like what you feel when you've had that opportunity to interact with people and then it's come to a close, you've left and you're maybe either going on a plane or a train or something like that.
yeah.
Personally, I've always found that to be a really amazing experience, but I'm curious what your thoughts are there.
I've never left a workshop saying I don't want to do that again.
Yeah.
No, I've always said I can't. This is so much, so pleasurable. People that do yoga are they're not to be trifled with because they're highly intelligent. You can't say no to them because they're doers. They will do what you ask them to do. So I've always tried my best to do something that's practical, b that was taught to me, that I can teach to someone else. And I try never to kind of get on a soapbox and pontificate about something. It's not necessary. And the people in front of me have been practicing yoga. Whether I'm there or not, they're still going to work. So I try to just be be in my lane and be the role I'm supposed to play. Uh, some teachers are really uh, they have a lot of energy and they like to shout and they like to like get people excited. That's not. I don't think that's my style. Other people are almost aloof, but I like to think that I'm a kid who likes, not a kid anymore, but who likes to practice yoga and still uses it as a way to recharge on a healthy kind of like I need my space, I need my movement, I need myself.
Nice.
Uh, yeah.
I get that. Are you, so you're in, we're getting close to, I know we scheduled in to have an hour together. And so I really appreciate you taking all this time with me. And I, I feel like I have a few more questions, but I want to be concise as well and help both you and I stay in our lanes. But on that note, I'm really curious to know if, as a school teacher and then teaching art, and as a yoga teacher, have you had a samadhi experience or like a union experience between those two endeavors? Like, I guess what I'm wondering is, do you have a moment where you can walk into the classroom with the students and feel like the experience of interacting with them and teaching, and then say walking into a workshop setting and working with students and having the experience of teaching, interacting is really the same thing? And like a merging of those experiences, or are they still separate due to some unforeseen reason?
Well, they could be one and the same. There are times that they have different skill sets, of course, but there are times uh, where I have the opportunity to impart something to them. So say typically in a drawing class, I work with 13-year-olds, so their attention span is very, very short. So if I get an opportunity to get one or two of them to get progress done, or if I can get the okay from them, I feel successful. Uh,
Yeah.
and I can't ask for that number to be much higher in a group of 10, 15 adults who do yoga. I know that one or two tips, if I can portray and influence them by just one or two things uh, that they can take home, then it's success.
Good point. That's cool, Ross. Man, well, I've thoroughly enjoyed this opportunity to get to meet you and to have a chance to ask you some questions and get some insights into your teaching. Is there any other thought or tidbit of motivation, inspiration, or advice that you'd like to help us close with?
Yeah, just keep practicing.
All right.
Yoga doesn't work unless you work for the yoga. So give yourself some time to practice. Give yourself some mental space to practice. Get your day in order so you can enjoy the benefits of what yoga can offer. Yeah.
Nice, Ross. Thank you so
Also, like,
much, man.
yeah,
Oh yeah, okay. No,
yeah,
say
of
what you
course.
say. What you say.
You don't need to have a fantastic back bend. You don't need to have a 3 hour practice. You don't need to get on an airplane and fly all over the world, even though it's great if you could. You need to own yourself and believe in yourself and never give up. Yeah,
Agreed.
yeah,
Agreed. It feels good to kind of keep it going, doesn't it? Because you've had over 20 years now of consistent Ashtanga practice, longer. If we go all the way back to that first high school session in I think you said it was a church basement.
yeah.
Yeah.
Church basement.
Would you agree it gets better? Even though, like, okay, yeah, maybe the physical part changes, but from like the wisdom and the maturity aspect, do you feel like you're in a growing better phase?
I'm certainly feeling like I can. I'm have the ability to trust myself more and more every day. And that always comes from a challenge you don't think you can overcome. And we get into the phase of our lives where life starts taking things away from us, and I think that's when a truer sense of gratitude comes into your day, whether it's finances or whether it's a job or whether it's loved ones. But I think it also is most poignant in a physical aspect when you start losing these asanas, when that ego has to be checked, and you can very easily see the clock ticking.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and I think that's one benefit of being older is you do not have time to mess around anymore.
Yeah.
You just don't have that procrastination in you
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. Good point. Awesome, man. Well, I'm so thankful and I hope to have the opportunity to meet you in person. For everyone listening, if you'd prefer to watch Ross and I talk, I will upload this onto YouTube on our Native Yoga Center channel. But if you whether you enjoyed it listening and or viewing, we really appreciate you all joining in. And Ross, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak with me. I really do appreciate it.
Thought it was absolutely my pleasure. Anytime, brother. Yogis helping yogis, right?
I love that. I saw that on your website that you have that as a point of concentration and focus. And
Yeah.
I think that's really important. Yes, agreed. I noticed that you'd written, I know yoga studios are tough. And so as a traveling teacher, let's figure something out. And Yogis Helping Yogis. And I thought, dude, I love that. Yeah,
Yeah. Thanks.
that's necessary. We
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love travel so much, and I've yet to meet a yoga studio owner that makes an abundance of money. They they work the tail off, and I can't be more proud than the studio owners I know. They're just great
Cool, man.
people.
Well, thank you so much. And I'll keep you posted here. And I can't wait to further our conversation down the road.
Anytime, Todd. Anytime.
Cool, man. Have a good one.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
Of course.